So last Sunday, we started a 13-week season of teaching together around this whole topic of wisdom. Now, how do we move in our lives from worry and fear and anxiety? I know you know nothing about any of those three things at all, but some people have those in their lives. But how do we move from worry, fear, and anxiety to living with wisdom sometimes as we move through seasons of worry, fear, and anxiety? And so one of the things that we're going to say over and over again is this statement, and we're going to repeat it every week, and it's this, that truth spoken is a good first step. It's a really good first step. However, truth trusted, or yet truth trusted, is a transformational step, or it leads to a transformational step. In our lives, things can be shared with us, but until we trust them enough to try them, to take a step, transformation usually does not occur until we trust, until we engage them in some way, shape, or form. And as we just celebrated a moment ago, 206 people, whether it was in Bible school, whether it was in the Life Starts, or whether it was Connections or Life Training, took a step this week to say, I'll try, I'll see what that looks like. And we want to invite those of you who are still processing, you can take a step this week. You can join something 1 week in, no problem whatsoever. We'd love to do it. We can facilitate you at guest services or online. So what do we want to talk about today? What's on our plank? What plank do we want to walk today? The plank is of wisdom. Now, I know the series is moving from worry to why, so we're not going to give everything away here, but how many of you know growing in wisdom is a process? It's something that we engage, where we lack wisdom, we're going to see some things about how good God is in that space, but it's also something that we have to engage. So this morning, we want to talk a little bit about this process to growing. Sorry, my voice got stuck there. This process to growing in wisdom. Because age and time and experience are wonderful teachers. But we can, in our lives, we can grow older, but not necessarily grow wiser. Whether you're 13 to 20 or you fill in the gap, we can grow, but not necessarily grow out of an area or mature through an area. And so there's a process. How many of you would agree that in your life you have one area, just one area, by a show of hands, where you would like to grow in this next season together? Okay. All right. Keep your hands up. Look around. You're not alone. You're not alone. Yeah. How many of you want to raise your hand, your feet, your hair, everything? How many of you want to raise the hand of the person beside you? You know, no, you save that for the car. That's too personal. Here's our proverb today that we want to talk about. It's Proverbs chapter 2, verses 6 to 8. And it shows us this process of growing in wisdom as students, as parents, as singles, as married couples, whatever demographic or culture we come from. This principle applies to all of us. And here's what it says. For the Lord gives, everyone say gives. He is so good. He is so generous. For the Lord gives wisdom. But then it continues and says, from his mouth comes knowledge. Everyone say knowledge. And now understanding. Okay. He stores up sound wisdom, so a specific type of wisdom, for the upright, for those who are humble and choose to walk in his ways. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity or wholeness, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. If you have begun a Bible study going through the book of Proverbs, because that's where we're going to live for the next, it was 13 weeks, now it's 12, next week it'll be 11, but for the next season of teaching, throughout the autumn season, that's where we're going to live. If you're going through the book of Proverbs, if you want to stretch yourself, you can also in the New Testament read alongside of it the book of James, because they go perfectly one against another. They go perfectly together. So in the book of James, this is what it says, and notice the similarities. If any of you lacks wisdom, in my Bible, I want to just cross that out and say, Jason, you lack wisdom, right? Because it's easier to see in others. It's harder sometimes to see in ourselves. So it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask who? Let him ask God. It doesn't say Google. It says, let him, now Google's good for certain things, but it says, let him ask God. An authority that's higher than where you're at. An authority, something that's different from what you're walking through, because in our circumstance, our perspective, we can only see it from here. So let us ask a higher authority. Let us ask God. Same thing we saw in Proverbs. Who gives? Everyone say gives. Who gives generously. Same thing we saw in Proverbs. To all. It doesn't say to some. It doesn't say just to people who see the world the way you see the world. It gives it to all without reproach. And it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man. He's unstable in all his ways. Now, I want you to pretend for a moment that you love boating. For some of you, that's not a hard thing for you to pretend. It's like, yeah, I don't have to pretend I love boating. For others of you, you're saying, no, not a chance. I hate it with every bit in me. If you're talking about like a little propeller motor that goes this, that's fine. If you're talking about a ship on the sea, no, thank you. But let's pretend you love boating. Okay, we got to ask it. How many of you love boating? Raise your hand. How many? No. Then just for today, you love boating. Just for today. Just for this analogy, you love boating. All right? When you're on a boat, and I'm in the crowd that like doesn't love boating. I love that you love boating. But when you're on the water, you accept some degree of movement, don't you? Because you realize you're not on asphalt. So there's something about the currents that move the boat. You know, some of you, if I just keep doing this, you're going to get nauseous. That's how I won't do it. But you accept some degree of movement. We all do. Yeah, has anyone ever watched one of those shows like The Deadliest Catch or those fisher boats that I mean, I don't want a TV in 4K. I don't want to see that and in vivid motion. I mean, or you watch the Tom Hanks film where or I don't know who that captain was, but the whole boating thing. I mean, have you ever seen a boat where it's no longer in control and the sea is in control? Like, that's something that we all go, oh, I'd like to be on that boat. Never. You know, I like it when it's like dead calm and it's like glass and there's someone sitting in a boat, you know, like fishing. I could deal with that. So we all understand that there's some degree of movement in our lives, and worry and fear and anxiety, they can create movement in our lives, and we understand that. But we would all agree, just like that boat you can picture on the sea that is no longer in control, that the sea is now controlling what the boat does. We can all agree that worry, fear, and anxiety are in all of our lives, and they create some movement, but it's different when worry, fear, and anxiety have control in our lives. It's a different storm. It's a different experience. It's one that we do our best to get through. There's a beautiful story you can read in the New Testament of Jesus' and disciples in an experience just like this. It's a difficult thing today if your core convictions change with every click of a link that you read an article. It's a difficult thing, and that's what James is saying, is that when your core convictions change, not when you're stuck in your ways and stubborn, that's not what we're saying, but when there is nothing that's foundational to you, that when every circumstance in life throws you completely, when every article that you read sways all that you believe, it's an exhausting place to live where you have almost very little place to call home. It's in that season we lack wisdom, that we're tossed to and fro, and that's not God's heart for any of us. And so what the scriptures teach is that we need to all grow in wisdom. So how do we do that? How do we do that today? Well, it's a process. And there's three things that we see to grow in wisdom, that no matter where you're at today, no matter whether your life just has a little bit of movement, like you're in a disagreement or the kids are pushing on some boundaries, there's some misunderstandings or there's some fluctuations within your job or your career, that's all acceptable degrees of movement. But crisis, it could be a diagnosis, a divorce, a bankruptcy. the death of a dream or whatever it happens to be. Well, no matter the season that you're in, I've got good news for you that God is faithful. And when he said he'll never leave you or forsake you, he means it. And he'll be faithful in the season. But his faithfulness also has to touch our faith. To what do we call out to? To what do we cling to when it seems as though there's not much to grab? You know, today I can just mention the date is September 11th. Just the date. And those of us who are old enough, we remember. We remember where we were on September 11th. A day that was a beautiful autumn day. Well, still summer, not yet autumn, but on its way. We remember where we were. We remember what looked like a terrible accident, only to quickly discover that it wasn't an accident at all. And whether you were alive then or you're here today, we know that our world changed on that day. The illusion of security has been one that it's now remained elusive. So what happens in life? What happens in culture? What do we grab to in moments such as these that are large, like I'm expressing, but they can also be smaller in nature? Well, Proverbs 2, verse 6 to 8, it gives us some handles. A progression, if you will, that how do we grow in wisdom? There's three things. There's knowledge, there's understanding, and then those two things engaged help us grow in this last thing called wisdom. Everyone say knowledge. Biblical knowledge is not just going to an encyclopedia and filling your head with facts. That's a type of knowledge for sure. But the knowledge that the book of Proverbs is speaking about is this. Knowledge is growing in wisdom, which comes from acquiring truth. That's what knowledge is. It is growing in wisdom, which comes from acquiring truth. Everyone say truth. It's not simply acquiring opinion. It's not just simply reading an op-ed that you're growing in knowledge. Yes, you can look at something from a different perspective. That's fine. But what Proverbs is digging into is this authoritative truth that not only about something, but more importantly about someone. Remember, the whole heart of Proverbs is that your trust may be in the Lord. That however much you trust Jesus today in this season would grow in the next seasons. That's the heart. So what we're looking at is truth is not only a something, it's a someone. And so knowledge is where we begin to open our heart. God, what does your word say about my life? What does your word say about my identity? What does your word say about relationships? What does your word say about giving? What does your word say about generosity? What does your word say about, and you can just keep going down the line. It's opening your heart. There's a speaker, I drew a blank this morning and I still haven't figured out where I heard it, but they said it this way. When it comes to things that we don't know, that we all know people in our lives, that those who don't know that they don't know. Those who don't know, they don't know that they don't know, and that's why they don't know. Right? Those who don't know they don't know. Now, that's not only them, that's us. That in our lives there are things that we don't know until someone lets us know. Exactly. But even when they let us know, sometimes we still don't know. It's true. We don't know. I've had conversations with people who are trying to let me know something, and the words are coming out of their mouth, but I don't know. I don't know what you're saying. Words. I know, but I don't know what you're saying. It's like and then there are things in life that we look at that I know, but I don't know. I'll give you an example. Physics. I know physics, but I don't know physics. I know chemistry. I know you mix the wrong things, bad things. I know that. I know what not, but I don't know. I know donuts, but I don't even know how a donut's made. I know caramel bars, but I don't know how they get the caramel in. I don't know. I don't know. Some of you are going like, you're a moron. It's one base, you put it in, and don't wreck it for the kids. I know there are presents under the tree. I don't know how they get there. Yeah, they're like, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. No, it's called Santa Claus. No, it's called Visa. But I know Visa. I know Visa. Now, Visa won't let you not know who Visa is. So what we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. Now, you can go through life simply then saying, well, I don't know. Well, I don't know. And in some cases, that's wise. When I look at a bridge, like a bridge that's built, I don't know. I trust it, but the mind that can plot and engineer that, because I don't know. If it's up to me, you live here, we live here, that's life. I don't know. Get a boat, get on a boat. No, I don't like boats. All right? I don't know. So in life, there are certain things where it doesn't matter how much you try, you just won't know. And you got to trust others, and that's okay. But there's other things in life that it's not okay just to go, I don't know. I don't know. You can take a step, and what Proverbs says is what you don't know, you can take a step to know. You can open your head and your mind and your heart to know. God, I want to know you. I want to know your ways. I want to know your word. He's not hiding from you. He's made himself known in the person of Jesus Christ so that you and I can know him. There are only two things necessary in the area of our giftings. There are only two things necessary to grow in what we don't know, and it's humility and hunger. First things, it's okay. So, some of you, I want you to say these words with me. I don't know. I don't know. It takes a lot of humility to say that. I don't know. But you'll frustrate people if you stop there. I don't know. That's humility. But hunger is, but I'm willing to learn to know. I'm willing to learn to grow. There's an I don't know and I don't care, which is a different thing. That's not what we're talking about today. Humility and hunger. And I would say this as a caveat. Be careful when it comes to disqualifying yourself from what you don't know too quickly. Let's say, for example, that you are filled with nerves to give a presentation at school or work, and you think you can't do it. And how many know that that's a true feeling? You feel overwhelmed. How many of you love public speaking? Can I see your hands, please? Okay, put you on the preaching schedule for the next, that's it, let's dive in. What you're feeling is true, but not necessarily ultimate truth. Has anyone here ever felt something and done it anyways, in spite of what you felt? Yeah. At the end of the day, when you get your presentation grade back, when I was in school or at work, whatever it happens to be, how many know that the grade is secondary to the growth that has occurred in your life? That you've learned an amazing principle, that I'm not governed by my feelings, I'm governed by something that's greater. And so when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to acquiring truth, we all need to grow with humility and hunger. God, I want to know you. I want to know what your word says. We find his truth through trusting his word. It's how we do it. It's not rocket science, but we find his truth by trusting his word. Remember the first few words of the proverb that we're diving in today. For the Lord gives wisdom. There's a really good book called The Best Yes by Lisa Turkust. And she says this, and I think it's very, very profound. And I'm going to read it, and I'm going to read it a little bit slower. And I want you to think about your life. Before I read it, how many of you have ever asked God for direction? Can I see your hands, please? Dearest of God, Keely. That's a beautiful prayer to make. I often make it too. It's a beautiful prayer. I don't want you to stop, but I thought this was a good quote. The one who obeys God's instruction for today, his instruction for today, will develop a keen awareness of his direction for tomorrow. She says, I'm always asking God for direction, but I'll miss it if I consistently ignore his instruction. So my question is, are there things in your life that you're asking God for direction in that you know that you're willingly ignoring his instruction? Are there things that God has made clear that it's not that you don't know, it's that I don't want to grow? That's a different process in our lives. So knowledge is good, but knowledge alone won't get us to wisdom, because we can grow in knowledge, but not necessarily grow in wisdom. You know, our world today is filled with know-it-alls. If you want to find any know-it-alls, just go online. Where would I go online? Anywhere you want. It's filled. We as a culture at our fingertips have access to more knowledge. Do you remember when you used to be able to get information in very different ways, like through libraries? Do you remember how hard research papers used to be? Do you remember at school how hard a research paper used to be? There was no Google back then. It was the Dewey Decimal System. And I still haven't figured it out. Those who don't know, they don't know. All I know is I would just ask, do you know where that book is? Yes, I do. Could you help me find it? No, go find it yourself. Librarians are awesome. Right? So there's that. But then there's a deeper level to growing in wisdom. That we can have all the knowledge, but we can lack the next word, which is understanding. Understanding. Understanding is growing in wisdom, which comes from living out the truth we acquire. Reading a book is great. It's great. But applying one thing you learned by reading in the book is better. Right? Listening to a sermon is great. ... if I don't say so myself. But applying one thing, just one thing, it's better. Being moved by a lyric in a worship song is great. Applying it to your situation is better. When we live out the knowledge we've acquired, we grow in this thing called understanding or insight. Helps us to see it. And as we grow in understanding, it also doesn't mean that we grow perfectly through it. None of us do. But we begin to understand. I've had conversations with people in my life, whether it be Lori, whether it be the children or others. But I've had conversations where they're telling me things that I don't know. And I don't know them. And then they'll say one thing, and all of a sudden now, I understand. And understanding takes it from up here to in here. It takes it from you to we. From us and them to us and him. It's this place of understanding. I would say it this way, that when acquiring wisdom, when we move from knowledge, which is learning things we don't know, understanding is what I know, I now know. Understanding is, growing in knowledge is, God, I trust that you're provider. And then you go through a season where you don't know why God is doing what he's doing. And then one way or another, God leads you through that season. And you understand. So you don't just know that he's provider, you understand he's provider. And it's a different level of wisdom the next time you find yourself in another season like that. Right? So you don't have to go all the way back to the beginning of I don't know. It's here's what it looks like now. I don't know everything. And I don't claim to know everything, but this one thing I know, God is faithful. Why? Number one, because his word says he is. And number two, let me show you in my life how he has been everything his word says he is. I understand. You know, understanding is interesting. Understanding is something that our culture needs a lot of. One of the most difficult questions that I can ask, but the most vital questions we can ask of each other is not what is your opinion, it's what's your story. What's your story? You know, this morning, you may have looked across and maybe you spotted somebody who was standing all through worship just a little sullen, looking sullen, just down or just... And you can go over and, don't you know who God is? And we can begin to do all that. But if you took one moment to go, talk to me about you. Maybe they would share with you, this week I was diagnosed with X. This week, I said goodbye to a family member. And all of a sudden, whether it be judgment or whatever, or even anything in our heart, I'm going to fix it, we would go, not only do I know, I understand, and it's actually a miracle that you're standing. Let me pray for you. What can I do? I mean, it changes the perspective. It changes the perspective, understanding. Understanding. When we're engaging culture today, it's not just getting culture to know what we know. It's having wisdom to walk alongside of culture with who we know God is, to who they believe God is. Sometimes the gap is very big, or there's painful stories, and rather than it being us and them, it has to be, yeah, me too. I've walked through things that are similar, and so, God, there's understanding now of who we need God to be. In relationships, sometimes it's that space and place of not do you hear what I'm saying, do you understand what I'm saying? Lori and I, one time, we were on a vacation together, and we read the book, The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman, because we were trying to take our marriage from 10 to 11. And that was a joke, but nevertheless, it's okay. Wow, your marriage is a 10? Yeah, it is in my eyes, but again, I don't know what I don't know. So we went through this book together, and I discovered Lori's love languages, and she discovered mine. And we thought it was going to take our marriage from 10 to 11, and it took our marriage from 10 to 4. Nice of you to laugh at that. Why? Because we went through the book and we understood each other's love languages, and I realized that if I brought home gifts, it doesn't matter to Lori. She doesn't care very much. What she wants is quality time and acts of service. That's what she wants. She'd rather have me do the dishes than bring home flowers. So I thought, oh, I didn't know that. Now I know that, and I can pray about that. No. In our house, it's a simple rule. If she cooks dinner, I clean dinner. It's a partnership. It's how it works. Okay. But again, I'm not saying I clean them well. I'm just saying I try. But it's interesting because once we knew what each other's love languages were, see, we had grace when we didn't know, but then once we knew and then we didn't do it, that's what took our marriage from 10 to 4. What did we have to move towards? Wisdom, understanding, why it matters, how it matters. And it's a process. It's a process. It's a process. So there's knowledge, which we can all grow in. You can sign up for a class. You can dive into a small group. You can keep coming on Sundays. I hope there's something that you learn that you don't know about who God is. that you can learn something about yourself, have the humility to hunger to grow. Then there's understanding, which takes it deeper. And that leads us over time to wisdom. And true wisdom is not an abstract principle. It is our daily walk, getting to know Jesus. That's what wisdom is all about. Because the scripture says, for the Lord gives what? The Lord gives wisdom. I'm not a rocket scientist, but let's say I take this, and let's say you were sneezing and you're in need of this. You don't need to. You're welcome. I even love that you played along even though you weren't sneezing. Wasn't that profound? No. I'm giving something, but unless you take it, how do you take it? Knowledge, understanding, engage it every single day. True wisdom. This is so huge. You'll know you're growing in wisdom when you don't need external pressures to turn to what's right. You don't always need an external pressure. You don't always need a crisis. You don't always need a mess. You don't always need chaos. That your heart begins to develop a taste for what is right. And rather than waiting till the crisis, you back it up a little bit and you choose it before the crisis hits. Some things in life we can't, but then there are other things we can. True wisdom is over time, our hearts develop a taste for making wise choices. Andy Stanley says it this way: in light of my past decisions, my current situation, and my future hopes and dreams, here's the question: what is the wise thing to do? In light of my past decisions, my current situation, and my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? So what we don't know, we got to take some steps to acquiring knowledge. What we now know, we need to take some steps of trust to understand one another. And this morning, as we conclude, there is something that we want you to both know and understand. One of our teammates is taking a faith-filled from to step in this next season. Pastor Kim, this is something that you may or may not know. If you know her at all, then you know this to be true, that she has a deep passion for kids, for students, and for adoption. And it's a growing passion. It's intensifying. The need for adoption in Canada is great. It's significant. And this burden comes not only from a place of personal experience in her own life with Steph and the boys and with Grace, but a true calling from Jesus. And so we'd like to share with you all this morning that Pastor Kim is going to invest in the development or the furthering development of the ministry of adoption by creating forever families on behalf of not only this church, but churches in Ottawa and beyond. And we see this as a significant, we are all about growing people and renewing Yao. And we see this as a significant renewing Yao step. And so to see what this could look like, Pastor Kim will be taking a sabbatical, a full sabbatical from her duties at Life Center in order to pursue what this endeavor can look like. Pastor Kim has a long history at Life Center. She began teaching kindergarten in our private school that we had a number of years ago that's still in existence in the city today called Life Christian Academy. She then took a position as the children's pastor for a number of years, and most recently was working with our creative team to bring campus consistency to Life Center, as we are one church in 3 locations. And so after 28 years of serving Life Center in these ways, it's a significant transition to be able to look and say, God, what could it be to build this ministry for not only this church, but churches in the city, and maybe, God willing, even beyond for the nation. Pastor Kim has the full support of the Life Center staff, the Pastor's Council, and in her pursuit to grow Destiny Adoption. Of course, we deeply value and appreciate the investment that she's made at Life Center, and her investment will continue to grow in the hearts and lives of all the people that she's touching and has touched. You're going to see Pastor Kim, of course, at church, but she's also going to be taking her full liberty by traveling to other churches in the city in her pursuit of placing children into forever families. So we're asking you as a community to join us as a staff and as a council in praying that God would give her wisdom. Give them wisdom. For Pastor Kim and for Stefan, who's continuing just normally what he does, to know that you can reach out, please. Let them know you're praying for them, that you're supporting them, you're standing with them. Because how many of you know 30+ thousand kids in Canada that need to find a forever home is significant. Renewing Yao is significant. In a moment, we're going to sing a song with Glenn, and there's a lyric in it that says that you hold orphans in your loving arms, and I think that is spectacularly beautiful because that's who God is. But how many know that it's not just God's arms, it's physical arms that these kids need, that children need. And so this is a significant step that we wanted you to not only know, but we wanted you to understand. And so it adjusts some things at Life Center, and we're going to work with those adjustments. Because to take a full sabbatical, some of you may say, I've been emailing, and why? Because she's on sabbatical. And so in order to allow her to dream of what this could be, we're just going to give it some time and some space for God to do that. And so I'm going to invite you to stand. So how does each of us then keep moving from worry to wisdom? Here's what Psalm 34:8 says as we close. Oh, taste and see that the Lord that he's good. Blessed is the man, blessed are you who takes refuge in him. So we're going to take a moment together to sing just a bridge and a chorus, not lengthy. And I ask you just to take a moment and say, God, where do I need wisdom? What do I need to know? Where do I need to grow? Where do I need understanding? How do I engage this? And then together as a community, we're going to pray for Pastor Kim and Stefan, for the boys and for Grace as they continue to engage this process. Say, God, what are you stirring in our hearts? What could this be? So Glenn, would you lead us? And then we're going to